Hey guys, today we're going to be talking about the HTMA, right? The mineral analysis test, which uses your hair. Now, this can be very helpful to look at your past 3 months of your body's minerals. Now, this can be much more helpful than a blood test because a blood test shows a snapshot in real time of what you're dealing with. But the problem with blood tests is your body is very good at keeping homeostasis, meaning it knows how to keep it at a good level. So you could show all healthy levels, but on a cellular level, you are really struggling. So we really want to know what are the minerals, what are the levels in our cells. This is called intracellular. Now, it's very hard to do that, but what we can do is get a reflection of that through extracellular, which is our hair, right? So our hair can tell us a lot about what's actually going inside our cells through a reflection extracellular, what's it pushing out, how much is in there. But that means we have to take it with interpretation because it's not always face value. And if we learn how to interpret it properly alongside understanding, an individual's symptoms and their lifestyle, and then we can use this to help build a picture, right? This isn't just, calcium is high, we need to start having calcium. That's not the picture. We're gonna dive deeper into what that actually means. It just means what is your, cells actually pushing out into your extracellular, which is your hair. So you actually take 3 inches of your hair. That's how you sample the test, and that's essentially 3 months. This is the past 3 months of this individual of what their cells or their minerals are looking like. So there's a few things that we're going to cover. First is understanding whether this person is a slow oxidizer or a high oxidizer. That's always the question. Now, to know that, it's just looking at the first 4 levels on the left. Fast oxidizers tend to have lower calcium, lower magnesium, higher sodium, and higher potassium. And we want to understand the person's, feelings and how they're actually getting on with life. Because if they are feeling more anxious, wired, burnt out, whatever, then we can say, okay, they're having the minerals of a fast oxidizer and the lifestyle of a fast oxidizer. We could probably assume that they're probably a fast oxidizer. Now, it's all about interpretation and hypothesis and likely to be, as opposed to like they're definitely this, right? It's hard to say that someone is definitely this. It's all about making informed decisions instead of perfect decisions. And a slow oxidizer is essentially the opposite: high calcium, high magnesium, low sodium, low potassium. And then a burnt out fast oxidizer is high calcium, low magnesium, low potassium, and low potassium. So by looking at this one, what do you think this person is? This would be a fast oxidizer who is burnt out. Okay, that's what we would interpret this as. And the reason I know this is because when speaking to the individual, they report those feelings. So it's good we now have the evidence of, okay, that makes sense. Typically with burnout, we're looking at sodium and potassium. Now, there's different stages of burnout. There's stage 1, which is essentially coping, which if this was true, we would probably see sodium and potassium really high. This means that your cells, as we said, your intracellular is pushing out these minerals into the extracellular to cope with the increase in stress, okay? That's why we have to interpret this properly, because people could look at that and go, I'm getting too much sodium, too much potassium. It's not necessarily true. If that didn't match up with their lifestyle, if they were having loads of Celtic sea salt, load of coconut water, then maybe we'd have to understand how much sodium and potassium are they actually getting and what does their lifestyle actually show. Are they actually getting burnout symptoms? The second stage of burnout is usually leveling out. Okay, it's starting to deplete. It's like, I can't keep doing this. And then the final stage of burnout is exhaustion, which is really low sodium, not really low, but below average. And when speaking to this person, they've been doing a lot of coconut water, a lot of the right things. They clearly are not deficient, in their nutrition, but clearly it's depleting so much of it. They're burning through so much because of their lifestyle, is because they're getting burnt out. And that just kind of confirms that. We didn't really need a test to show us that because they were feeling that way, but it just confirms that. So then we're going to continue supporting their sodium potassium while also more focusing on lifestyle factors of actually getting rid of the burnout, because we can keep funneling in more potassium and sodium, but it's like, well, you're burning through it so quickly because your lifestyle is demanding it. So we have to actually fix that first. Then we have, and again, what we're going to go into is the ratios. The ratios are actually more important than the individual levels, okay? So a really important ratio that you may have heard of is zinc to copper ratio, okay? Now, again, this can be interesting. We need to understand this ratio. Now, this ratio is fairly healthy. There's nothing clearly wrong here. Again, this individual was taking some organ meats, so we might slow down on that just with the copper and start taking a little bit more zinc. But again, this is why we can't take it for face value, because there's instances where people can have really low copper and really high zinc, and therefore they're going to start supplementing with copper. But that can be really, really dangerous because, again, it's an interpretation. It's a case of their copper might be so high intracellular that they're actually not pushing out any extracellular, and they're trying to cope with that. And they're actually pushing out loads of zinc because they're trying to displace this, right? Zinc and copper have a relationship where they can displace each other. That's why the ratio is really important. That's why you can't take so much zinc and then never any copper. We have to find a nice balance, okay? And we can see the ratio here. For this individual is decent. It needs maybe some minor tweaks. If we can see zinc copper down here, it's just off ideal, which is good. That's more important than the individual level than anything else. We want to understand the ratios, which is more important. And you can see the ratios for things like sodium, magnesium, these are off because of the burnout is drawing out the sodium and things like that. And then also we have iron and copper, which is quite high, okay? Because the iron is fairly high. And again, this individual was doing quite a lot of organ meats. So it's like, okay, cool, we're going to slow down a little bit on the organ meats, more of a lifestyle factor that we're going to do. And that matches up with what they've been doing in their life. And it just gives us some indication of what they need to do. But we have to be really, really, really careful with two things here. And that's copper and iron, because copper and iron are redox active, which means they can be stored in the tissues, right? And low readings, as we mentioned, can mean toxicity, not deficiency. So we always need to confirm. But copper and iron can be stored in the body, and they can cause, again, they're redox active. If they don't have the right makeup, they can cause oxidative stress and cause a lot of issues on the body. So we never just want to take copper supplements or iron supplements if we don't know what the actual answer is. With other supplements, like if we took if we took more magnesium, your body can cope with it. It can pee it out. It's water soluble. It's going to be okay. With with iron and copper, it's very, very hard to manage it if your iron levels are too high. So that's why we need to be really careful with these two. And for women, again, it's much easier for you to displace iron because you menstruate. Unless you're postmenopausal, it's much easier to get rid of excess iron. And if a man is excess in iron, that can cause a lot of issues. Iron overload can cause increase in SHBG, which then has an effect on your hormone profile as well. And you might have to actually donate blood to actually shift the plasma. Okay, so that's really important to know that your copper and your iron, and again, this person's a little bit high, but we know why that is, and we're going to alter it, and we can increase the zinc a little bit. Selenium is usually very low for people, right? Selenium is found in Brazil nuts. It's really important for your thyroid health and your hormonal health. But this individual has been doing Brazil nuts, but for most people, it's quite rare to see a good level. So the fact this is good is great. And then molybdenum, this individual was supplementing with molybdenum because they were doing a TTFD protocol. So it's clear why that was higher, and that's not an issue. They will just start to balance out when they won't take any more. And then iodine, we need some more iodine. We're going to take some more iodine. There's some levels which are like a clear face value, let's take it. There's some which we need to more focus on the ratios, as we saw down here as well. But some of these are just face value, okay? Then what is really important is the toxic elements. Now, again, this person has been looking after themselves very well. So none of their toxic elements is in the red, which is rare, to be honest with you. It's rare to see such healthy first-time analysis tests where their levels aren't that high. But this person's been doing binders. They've been doing the right things. So it makes sense why they're doing it. And then, again, it's the ratios that are important, the protection ratios. And this is all to do with receptors. We can see that, for example, selenium protects against mercury because they can bind to the same receptor. So if your body has nothing to bind onto, it can bind onto the mercury. But then if it has the selenium, it's going to prefer the selenium over the mercury in the receptor. So that's why having more selenium will protect you against mercury. And that's why the ratio is really important. So your mercury can be medium, nothing too threatening on the actual test result. But if your selenium is really low, it means that even though the mercury is low, your protection ratio is low. And that means the mercury can override and actually cause some issues, even though the amount of it is still low. Okay, so if this person did have high mercury, for example, it's also a case of like we need to work on the ratio. If they had low selenium, we have to work on the selenium as well as the mercury to make sure we give that balance. And the body now prefers the selenium. But if it has nothing to attach onto, it can bind onto the heavy metal. And that's the same with lead. Lead and calcium, and lead and iron and things like this. So that's why the ratios and the balance of minerals is really, really important. not just individual levels. And the higher the ratio, the more protection. So you can see this individual has essentially perfect protection against heavy metals because their mineral balances are so good. The only problem really is the burnout that we have to manage. But apart from that, protection ratios are really, really good. But that's why we need to not just do heavy. So a lot of people, if you had mercury toxicity, a lot of people, and the conventional way is just chelation, get rid of the mercury. And even though that can be quite dangerous, but we have to say, okay, what are we replacing the mercury with? And in this example, it would be selenium, making sure we're getting enough selenium as well to gently support the body and actually give it the receptor what it needs and the preferable nutrient it needs. And then we have some additional elements which are looking really good, apart from the silicone, but this individual, again, has been taking silica. So it's really important to understand what the person's been doing. And that's not necessarily an issue because we're doing silica for aluminum support. So silica, especially living silica, can help block the absorption of aluminum, which again is a toxic heavy metal, and actually increases the secretion of aluminum through your urine as well. So that's why they've been doing this. So not really a big issue because we understand why they're doing it and what they're doing it. If they weren't doing this and it was just randomly like this, then we can start to look into why that might be. But there's evidence of okay, that makes sense. They've been doing that. The only real thing for this individual is boron, which it's kind of rare to see a severe boron deficiency, but that is the case. So instantly we've got to get in some boron supplementation. And that again isn't a case of it might be wrong. It usually is face value. Boron is usually face value. Okay, this is low, as opposed to it's not pushing it out because it's toxic. You can't really get toxic in boron unless you went really, really silly. So we're going to get in some boron supplementation. And this is why it can sometimes be hard to interpret HTMA, because this calcium is really high. Okay. And this calcium ratio, if we have a look here, we could say that high calcium to potassium ratio means that the thyroid is struggling. But also we could say that the calcium is high because boron is needed for calcium placement. Okay, but you can also say cortisol also raises calcium. So you have three reasons why the calcium can be high, and all three of them could be true. So it's you can't really draw a conclusion just on this. It's all about informed decisions, giving us more evidence as opposed to always a solid answer. But we could probably interpret that it probably is due to the boron and the stress combination. And typically what we want to do is do a HTMA. I keep saying, is it HTMA? Yeah, HTMA in 3 months' time. When the hair's regrown, you've got a new set of hair or new set of kind of roots coming through. And then you can retest to see where the levels are at. And then hopefully you see the boron come out. Hopefully you see the sodium potassium come up a little bit. You see that the copper come down a little bit with less organ meats. You see that the calcium starts to balance out a little bit. But that's pretty much everything. That's how we interpret it. But hopefully you understand now how to do it for yourself. And if you have any questions, please do let me know. But again, that's why it's really important, because the average person would look at this and go, oh, I need to stop eating my yogurt bowl in the morning because my calcium is too high. It's probably not the case. It's usually because calcium is just in the wrong place. And again, that is a long-term concern, because again, calcium in the wrong place can cause calcification in the arteries, which is not a good thing at all. But again, we're catching this early. We're doing the right things. We're going to be okay. We just got to make sure that we're taking vitamin D, K2, which this person was already doing. So it's probably a case of the boron is affecting it. And again, the stress is affecting it. That's why it's pushing out more calcium to cope with it. Apart from that, that's everything. I hope you learned something. Any questions, let me know. Speak soon.